Welcome back to another video. It is a mock draft time. Today we will be doing a two-rounder. This will be exciting. We are less than 5 days away from the official NFL draft. And I'm getting excited. We got a lot of potential things that could happen. I could see a crazy top 10 happen. There could also be a chalk top 10. And then the rest of the draft goes chalk. But I doubt that'll happen. Let's get into it, and I'm excited for the possibilities. Okay. So, first overall, this one, I'm not even going to explain it too long. This is obvious. Cam Ward to the Tennessee Titans. It's looking more and more obvious every day that this will be the result. And it's a good one. If you believe that Cam Ward is your franchise quarterback or can be your franchise quarterback, I think you have to take that guy. And I think that at this spot in the draft, number one overall pick, you have to take a guy that you believe can change the outcome of your future and your franchise. Number two, the Cleveland Browns. It is also looking more and more obvious every day that this pick will be Travis Hunter. I do still think there's a possibility for Abdul Carter here, but Travis Hunter has been the consensus, and I think that. Sorry, my dog's barking. But I do think that Travis Hunter is the prospect that maybe has one of the higher ceilings in this draft, and I think it's interesting to see where the Browns would put him. I think it would be a receiver with a little bit of corner mixed in, but that's what it's looking like it's going to be at this point in the draft. All right, next up, the New York Giants. So there has been a lot of buzz for Shedur Sanders going here as of late. However, I do still think Abdul Carter just makes the most sense. I do think in the end it'll be Abdul Carter, and if they get Shedeur Sanders, it would be via a trade back up, not at three. Abdul Carter's a transcendent playmaker as the defensive lineman, and Kayvon Thibodeau is a little bit questionable with his results. You don't know if he can necessarily be that guy for you, but Abdul Carter is one of the best edge prospects we've seen in a while. So I think at three, you do pull the trigger on arguably the best player in the entire draft. Number four, the New England Patriots. I know this is a boring pick, but Will Campbell just makes a little too much sense for the Patriots here. I really want to give this team either Ashton Genty or Jalen Walker or Mason Graham because I feel like those guys are more blue chip and better overall prospects than Will Campbell. But when you have a guy like a Drake May, your franchise quarterback, your future, you need to protect that guy. You need to get help for him. You cannot give him all the weapons but no armor. So, Will Campbell is the selection for the Patriots here. Next up, the Jacksonville Jaguars. This has been Mason Graham for me for the longest time, and it might very well still be Mason Graham. But Ashton Genty's picking up steam. So is Jalen Walker out of Georgia. So is Armand Membu, the tackle out of Missouri. So there's a lot of possibilities here. I do think in the end Mason Graham is the most likely, but that's been done before. So let's have some fun and let's send Ashton Genty to the Jaguars. This is a team where Travis Etienne has been a little bit questionable over the past few years, and I feel like this is a team where a running back could really help them. They have some good offensive weapons like Brian Thomas, and I feel like Ashton Genty adds another level to that offense, and I think that Jacksonville thinks they can compete right now, and Ashton Genty would be a great win now piece. Next up, the Las Vegas Raiders. The Jacksonville Jaguars sniped their guy and Ashton Genty, and now who are they going to go with? I think the guys that I'm debating here are either Jalen Walker, Armand Membu, or maybe even Shedur Sanders, because Geno Smith is on a 2-year deal. There's some real connections with Tom Brady, and I'm going to go that way. I was initially going to go with Armand Membu, but Shedur Sanders is here. Tom Brady, there's a lot of connections with Shedur and Tom, a lot of connections between Shedur and Vegas. And then Geno Smith is only on a 2-year, $66 million deal, or 2-year deal with only $66 million guaranteed. So you can sit Shedur behind him for a year or two and still get some great results because you got to think ahead. You can't just think for the next 1, 2, 3 years with your quarterback. You have to think in the future. And if you have a guy here, Raiders think they're going to compete, and you might not be in a spot this high again. So if you think you have a quarterback you really like in Shedur Sanders, I think you take him here at 6. Next up, the New York Jets. This is an interesting one. They have a Mason Graham is here, and that might just be the pick. But there's also Armand Membu, and their whole offensive line is mostly complete, other than that right tackle spot, which is Armand Membu's main position, the position he is most comfortable in. And I think that would really, really bolster that offensive line and really help their identity with Justin Fields. But I think Mason Graham is too good of a talent to pass up here, and if he falls to 7, they would be delighted to have him. Next up, the Carolina Panthers. This is for the longest time, this is defense for me. It's going to stay defense. And I think there are clear top two defensive players in this draft, not named Abdul Carter, and those are Mason Graham and Jalen Walker. And one of those guys is still available in Jalen Walker, and I do think the Panthers would take him. He's from Carolina. He's from South Carolina initially, or maybe he's from North Carolina. He's from one of the Carolinas, and he's he's really what they need. He has some Frankie Louvu type skill sets, which they can fit in very well with that Panthers team that formerly had Louvu, and I think he can slide right in and be an impact guy on that defense that really has nobody. They're struggling. Now the Saints, Shedur Sanders is off the board. Is this still a quarterback? I think it could be. I think Jackson Dart does make sense here. But are we going to go there? Let's explore some of the other possibilities first. So you got Tedero McMillan, you got Matthew Golden. I think receiver is a real possibility, and then the D line is a need, and then that would be guys like Mike Green or maybe Shamar Stewart. I don't think that's going to happen. You could go Tyler Warren. I could see that being an interesting scenario here. They do need tight end. But I think in the end, they really do want a quarterback, and quarterbacks have been pushed up the board with one already going at 1 and then Shedur going at 6. So I do think in this spot, Jackson Dart would make the most sense, and that's who they would select. And this is a guy who have gotten a lot of similar comps to Jalen Hurts. I don't necessarily see it. He is shorter, he's not as bulky, he doesn't have as great of running ability, but he is more prototypical big, able to run, big arm quarterback that Jalen Hurts is similar to, and that's what Kellen Moore succeeded with while he was in Philadelphia. And if this is a team that feels like they want to compete right now, I know Jackson Dart's not the most win now player, but you're either going to have Jackson Dart at the quarterback position if you're in this spot, or Spencer Rattler, because it's not looking like Derek Carr will play next year. So I do think Jackson Dart can be a piece for this year, and then you keep building. And if you truly believe in him, this would be a great pick. Now, the Chicago Bears. This is also one of the most interesting picks in the draft. I feel like Tyler Warren could go here. I really do like Cole Kmet, and it makes more sense to me, honestly, to fill in that running back position. But do the Bears see a big gap between Amari Hampton and Tyler Warren? Is Tyler Warren viewed as a blue chip talent while Amari Hampton is not? That is something interesting that could be monitored. So, where do we go here? This could also be defensive line. For the longest time, I had Amari Hampton here because I saw the Jameer Gibbs pick for Ben Johnson while he was in Detroit, and that worked out marvelous. And I think Amari Hampton isn't he doesn't have the same skill set as Jameer Gibbs. He's a lot more powerful, not as shifty and explosive, but he could fill in a similar role in that offense. But I do think that they usually build the trenches before the big guys, before the blue chippers, or not before the blue chippers, before the skill guys. And that made me want to go with defensive line here. But I don't like any of these defensive linemen that high. So it's either Kelvin Banks Jr. or Tyler Warren for me. And I do think in the end I will go Tyler Warren because I think Ben Johnson sees that guy. He sees his blocking ability, which can help in the trenches. He sees like everything he can do, the throwing ability, which Ben Johnson showed he loved to do with some of those skill guys. Just throw the ball, get it in the behind the line of scrimmage, and have them throw the ball. He can do that. I know you haven't heard much people rave about his throwing ability, but he has it. And then everything you can do with him in the receiving game, even the rushing game. This is a gadget player for Chicago, and it might not be the biggest need, but in the end, I think you have to take best player available over your positions of need, because once you start taking positions of need over the best players, that is when you get in trouble. San Francisco 49ers. This has to be offensive line for me. I mean, there is a possibility where this is a Will Johnson or Jahad Campbell or Shamar Stewart, but or, oh shoot, Dessa Kelvin Banks. I didn't see Armand Membu still on the board. This is an absolute Armand Membu pick here. This is a team that needs offensive line. Trent Williams is going to retire soon. They lost some guys. And even if Armand Membu can't play left tackle, he could fill in at right tackle or the guard spot. He's a very flexible offensive lineman. And I think you have him learn from a guy like Trent Williams. That would be a very, very valuable selection here. Next up, the Dallas Cowboys. I think this is going to be skill position. I would not be surprised if this were defensive line or offensive line. Kelvin Banks Jr. and Tyler Booker are very much in the discussion here. But I do think in the end, this will be skill, and I've come down to either Amarian Hampton or Matthew Golden out of Texas. I was watching the Matthew Golden tape and some Tedero McMillan stuff yesterday. I think Matthew Golden's far and away better than Tedorova, but that's just what I see. Um, I think at this spot you pair Matthew Golden with CD Lamb. He's a great deep threat, not just because of that 4.29 speed, but if you watch him, he has excellent concentration on the ball. His hands, like when he's up in the air and his eyes are on the ball, you're not getting that ball out of his hands because he has elite hands, he has elite vision, and he's fast. He can make things happen in the return game. I think Matthew Golden would be a great pick for the Dallas Cowboys here. I do not think it would be a reach. Next up, the Miami Dolphins. This is a team where I was doing a little bit of offensive line, a little bit of cornerback, a little bit of safety, but now this has to be secondary with them trading away a guy like a Jalen Ramsey. So if we're looking here, cornerback, safety. I think what I've come down to are these three guys at the top of the board. Malachi Starks, Will Johnson, or Jade Barron. And I do think I'm going to go Will Johnson here. This is a guy who is projected to be a top 5-ish pick at the beginning of this process. And he had a little bit of he didn't have as good of a year this year. He was a little bit riddled with injuries. He was a little more inconsistent. But and he's a little slow, which some prospects don't like. He's more in that 4.5 speed, unlike a guy like a Jade Barron who ran a 4.3 something, I believe. And but the thing with Will Johnson is he has great vision on the ball at the cornerback position. He makes plays. He gets a ton of pick sixes, even though he doesn't have the speed. He shades defenders really well. He can read the coverage. He can read balls. Pause. He's really good, and I think he would fill in for that Jalen Ramsey role. And this is a team that already need cornerback depth, and now they're losing their number one guy for probably a third. I don't like that trade for them, but you have to bring another guy in to refill the ammo. Next up, Colts. I think you got to give Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones a weapon to see if they can be the guys in Indianapolis. And this is a team that has a glaring need at the tight end position, and you just have a guy who's top 10 on a lot of boards, and a guy who I said was rising up the boards in a recent short I made. That is Colston Loveland. This is a guy who really was viewed above Tyler Warren before the season and was possibly a top 10 pick. But now Tyler Warren's gone up, and the talk the whole time has been some people like Colston Loveland more than Tyler Warren, but Tyler Warren's gone ahead of him every single mock. Could we see a Colston Loveland before Tyler Warren happen during the draft? It's possible. But I do think they would love this pick for the Colts because he's a great receiving threat. He's also not bad at blocking. He's not just a pure receiver at the tight end position. I see some similarities to Dalton Kincaid, but I do think he's a better blocker, and I think he's a better just all around threat. So I do think at his size, 6'5, 245, with that receiving threat, he would be an excellent fit for this Colts team that loves their athletic freaks. And at that size, with his speed, his receiving ability, and his blocking, he would be an excellent selection for the Indianapolis Colts. Now, the Atlanta Falcons. This is a team that really, really needs defensive line help, and I that's all I can see them doing, unless I want to take Tyler Shuck to back up Michael Penix. But here I think who I'm debating is Shamar Stewart, Michael Williams, or Walter Nolan. Walter Nolan is a bully on the inside. He has incredible strength, incredible power, but he wasn't always there. He was a little inconsistent, and there are some character concerns that have been brought up. Shamar Stewart, similar to Walter Nolan, just at a much greater level. He is a bully. 6'6", closer to 270, but he's a mauler, and he has athletic traits, man. He ran a 4.59 at that at 270. At 6'6", 270, you're running 4.6, and he has the incredible power. He's got the jumping ability, which just shows how explosive he is. And you also have a guy like Michael Williams, who's a little bit more fine-tuned than a guy like Shamar Stewart, but he's also built not quite to the athletic level of Shamar Stewart, but still 6'5", 265, has that twitch. He's young, he's only 21, but there are some injury concerns there. I do think in the end, I think the upside of Shamar Stewart might be too much for the Falcons to pass up, especially for a team that has needed defensive line help for the longest time. And you're bringing in a guy who can be a real difference maker if you hit on him. And I think in the first round, if you have a guy that can hit, or not literally, but who can be as much of an impact player as Shamar Stewart could be with his rare athletic traits, I think you have to cash in on that. Next up, the Arizona Cardinals. This is this is interior defensive line or offensive line for me. I could see a world where Jahdae Barron goes here, but I do think in the end, Kelvin Banks has been rising up the draft boards. He's a guy who had an excellent sophomore season. He had a little bit more of a rocky junior year, but he still won best tackle in the nation. And I think he just makes a lot of sense here. I know they have Jonah Williams, but he's not a great tackle. You can slide Kelvin Banks right in at left tackle. That gives you two young tackles to be your cornerstones in Paris Johnson and Kelvin Banks Jr., and I think Kyler Murray would be very happy with that selection. Next up, the Bengals. I do think this could be interior offensive line, but I have gone defensive line the whole process, and I'm going to stick with that. This is a team that needs a difference maker on the defensive line. And Walter Nolan here, he's a difference maker. So he's going to go here. If they are able to keep Trey Hendrickson, which is a big if Trey Hendrickson plays next year, which is also a big if due to possible contract holdouts, Walter Nolan and Trey Hendrickson would be a great duo together. You got your Thunder on the inside, you got your Lightning on the outside, and Trey Hendrickson. And I think there's a lot that this team could do. I've heard some comps to Geno Atkins with Walter Nolan. I'm just saying. Next up, the Seattle Seahawks. This has been one of my picks that I have done a lot recently, and I do think it makes sense because you look at the Seattle Seahawks receiver core, and it's Cooper Kupp and JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba, both more slot receivers. Now, JSN can play a little bit on the outside, but that's not realistically where you would want to see him the whole time. And you got a guy who, by many, are viewed as the top receiver in this draft, a true X receiver, a true outside guy who can make a big impact on your team in Tedero McMillan, and that's where I'm going here. I watched him. I don't see it. I think a lot of his stuff was short or just the ball being fed to him. He dropped some balls. I think he has concentration issues, but he's big, he's lanky. He can get down the field, and if he's open, he can make some stuff happen. He does get open quite a bit, which I'll give to him. He has good route running. He's polished there, but I do see some holes with him. But I think the idea of a true X receiver for the Seattle Seahawks at this spot of the draft would really excite them. Now the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think Jahdae Barron is the best player available, and it's a position of need for the Bucks. So I do think Jahdae Barron makes the most sense here for the Bucks. This is a guy who won Corner of the Year last year. He was excellent at Texas, at UT. This is a guy who doesn't have prototypical boundary corner size. He's 5'11, 200, was a slot corner for the first couple years of his college career. However, he went to the outside. He won the Thorpe Award, I believe. Maybe it's not the Thorpe Award. I don't think it is. Sorry. He won Corner of the Year, whatever that award is in college football. And 5'11, 200, like this PFF profile says, he is versatile. He can go inside. He can play outside. He can be a nickel. He can be a dime. He can be a lot of things. And I think the idea of pairing him in that secondary with a guy like Antoine Winfield in the back, that would be an exciting possibility. I don't think this guy will fall all the way down here, if I'm being honest, but Amarian Hampton would be an excellent, excellent selection for the Denver Broncos at this spot. This is a team where Sean Payton has been talking about his Joker, how he wants a guy like an Alvin Kamara, a receiving threat, and a bruising running back who can really just open up that offense. And Amarian Hampton is exactly that. And that would really, really help a young quarterback in Bo Nix, who already has some decent weapons, but also adding in a guy like Amarian Hampton could really elevate them to the next level. This is one of the most questionable picks for me in the entire draft because if they, I don't know what they're going to do. There's no quarterbacks on the board left, I think they would consider. And unless you're going Jalen Milrow this high, which I have had a couple of times, I don't see it with Jalen Milrow. I really don't. He has the athletic prowess to be an elite quarterback in the league. He has the deep ball ability to be an elite quarterback, but it's everything else that doesn't work. It's the processing, it's the short accuracy, it's the medium accuracy, it's the flow of the game, it's the footwork. I don't see he's not a finished product, but that's also what I thought with Jalen Hurts when I in 2020 when I was 10 years old. Um, but Jalen Milrow, I don't see him being that great. I think he's much more of a project, and from what I've seen, I think they're gonna lean another way anyway. Malachi Starks could be a possibility here. Kenneth Grant could be a possibility, but I've seen a lot of buzz with Derek Harmon here, and I think it makes sense. This was a guy who transferred from Michigan State to Oregon. He had one meaningful year of production, but in that year, he showed great football IQ. He showed an ability to really wreck the offensive line, get through, make a difference. He's a leader. People love his character, and I think that for a team like the Steelers, you can have a guy like a Cam Hayward mentor him, and I do think he has a similar playstyle to Cam Hayward. So I think this could be a good pick for them. And then if you want quarterback, maybe it's in the second or the third with a guy like a Jalen Milrow, a Will Howard, a Quinn Ewers, or a Kyle McCord, maybe even Tyler Shuck if he falls that far. So you don't necessarily have to take quarterback in the first round here, which is why I went Derek Harmon. The LA Chargers. This is a team where everybody and their mom has had a wide receiver, tight end, or running back for the longest time. But their edge situation is terrible. They lost Joey Bosa this offseason. They have a 34-year-old Khalil Mack for one more year on a one-year deal, and I think they need edge help here. And you're looking at the guys that are available. You got two that are really good. You got Michael Williams and you got Mike Green. Michael has a he has the size, he has the level he played at was elite. Mike Green, on the other hand, he has the production. He's a violent, fast edge rusher, and I'm really debating here. Who do I go with? I think I think this would be Mike Green because there are some mild injury concerns with a guy like a Michael Williams. And Mike Green's more of a finished product, I think. And I think that pairing him with Khalil Mack could make that defensive line a little bit more dangerous next year. And I think that this would be a pick where it's depth. You're fixing a position where you don't have anyone, and he's still one of the best players in the draft. Not one of the best, but he at this spot is one of the best players still available. The Green Bay Packers. This is a pick that I like. There's a lot of possibilities. I think Jahad Campbell at this spot would be amazing. I think he's a top 10 guy, but he has that labrum surgery, so it might not be an immediate impact next year. And they also have linebackers already, so this might not be the time. But a guy like Kenneth Grant fits in with what Green Bay wants to do. He's big, he's athletic, and I think this would make sense for the Packers. You look at him, he's 6'3", 340, but at that size, he is athletic. He can He's fast, he's swift, he gets to the passer sometimes, but where you really see him affect the game is with the run stop, and that is something he does at a great level. This is a spot for the Minnesota Vikings where I see a trade out. Absolutely, because they only have 4 picks in this draft. I could see a possibly not Minnesota. What am I saying? Minnesota trading down and Cleveland trading up for a guy like a Jalen Milroe or a Tyler Shuck or even the New York Giants. But if they do stick here, I think it would be because Malachi Starks is here. Early on in the process, he was viewed as one of the elite guys, and he had a little bit more of a rocky year last year. He didn't show the same consistency he had in the year prior, but he's still one of the best prospects in the draft at a position of need for the Vikings, and I think this would be a pick that they would love. The Houston Texans. This feels like a spot where Tyler Booker or Kelvin Banks, whoever's available, would be the spot, and if not them, Josh Simmons. So I think Tyler Booker makes sense there, and you traded away Laramie Tunsil this offseason. Now that offensive line's looking really rough, and guard is a need, and Tyler Booker, he's viewed very highly. So I do think he would be the selection here. Next up, the LA Rams. For a long time, this was either corner or offensive line for me, and as a Rams fan, John Campbell would be very nice. Josh Simmons would be very nice. Luther Burden would be very nice too, to pair with Puka Nakua. He can go in the slot. Puka can go in the slot sometimes as well. You got Devontae on the outside. That would be a great receiver core, but I think the bigger position of need is offensive line. And I think Josh Simmons, before he got injured, was gearing up to possibly be the best tackle in this class, but he did have the knee injury, which kind of hampered his season and it ended it. So I think that at this spot, you're getting good value for the LA Rams. And I know they've been looking heavily into quarterback position with guys like Shedur Sanders and Jackson Dart, but as a Rams fan, if we draft Jalen Milroe or Tyler Shuck here, would not be happy. Tyler Shuck is a discussion for another video. I am not high on Tyler Shuck, but I'll get to that a little bit later. Probably at the 33rd or 34th pick when he gets selected, if he gets selected. Next up, the Baltimore Ravens. Jahad Campbell staring me right in the face, but I can't. Because there's a guy, Nick Eamon-Wari, who this would be a perfect situation for. He is an athletic freak. 4'39" at what? 6'3", 225. At that height and weight, he ran that fast. He has incredible power. He plays really well, too. What he's not going to be in the league is a single high safety, which is okay, especially on this Ravens team because you got maybe the best safety in the league in Kyle Hamilton already, and nobody is getting any deep balls thrown on this group. And this is a guy, Nick Eamon-Wari, who can go in the box. He can play cornerback. He can be a bunch of different things. So I do think this is a guy where this would be a great value pick for the Ravens. I think the Detroit Lions would be licking their chops if Jahad Campbell fell to them at this spot. This is a guy who can come off the edge, but mainly would be an off-ball linebacker. I know this isn't the biggest need for them, but you don't have that many inside linebackers outside of Jack Campbell, and Jahad Campbell can be all over the field. I didn't even realize you would have two Jay Campbells as your linebackers. That would be a fun story. And he's one of the best players in this draft who fell due to injury concern. I could see him going as high as 8. I've had him going 8 to the Panthers before. But I think you're looking down the board. Linebacker's not as valued. And I think at this spot, this is too low, but there's a possibility where the labrum is worse than we think, and he does fall to this spot. Now, the Washington Commanders. This is an interesting spot here. I've had many different things. I've had Trevion Henderson out of Ohio State, which is somewhere I might go. But I think at this spot, you have your edge guys available. Mike Kell fell all the way down here. If he's available here, Eagles would definitely trade up and take him. But we're not doing any trades here, and I do think he is the best edge rusher available at this spot. And I think that that would be an excellent pick. They have a real need at edge rusher, and Michael would fit right in. Maybe it would take a year or two to blend right in, but once he's at that level, I think he could be an elite edge rusher in this league. You're seeing a similar fall to what Nolan Smith had. I believe 29 was the pick where Nolan Smith went a couple years ago, and he has been a dog for the Eagles, even though he did have a little bit of a slow rookie year. The Buffalo Bills. This is interesting because I've had them taking Derek Harmon or Kenneth Grant before. They're both gone. I've had them taking Jahad Campbell. He is gone. So I'm debating between a couple of guys. Donovan Ezeruku would fit in with this team pretty well, I think. I think that's a potential spot you could go. I think Carson Schweschinger could be a first round pick. I said that in my shorts about the NFL draft risers, where I also mentioned Colston Loveland. He could be a first round pick, and I've had him go into the Lions before. But you also have Maxwell Harrison here, who is a pick for a lot of people for a long time. And he is fast. He can stick onto your guys, onto the receivers. And that this is just a tough spot here. There are a ton of guys. I do think in the end that, man, this is tough. You know what? We'll do it. This is not a deep linebacker class at all. And I think you have a guy in Carson Schweschinger who's really risen up draft boards. He's a great tackler. He's a leader. This is a guy who I think fits the Buffalo mentality, and I think he would be the pick here. And that would be something you maybe haven't seen a ton, but this is a very interesting prospect, and I could see him going very high. Next up, the Kansas City Chiefs. Where are we going here? Offensive line, absolutely. Absolutely offensive line. If there's a good offensive lineman available, and there are two quality offensive linemen that could go in the first, I think, and Gray Zabel could be a really good pick. They do need guard, but I think the bigger need for them is tackle. Even though they did bring in that guy from San Francisco, the backup, I don't think that stops you. You got mauled on the offensive line, and Josh Connerly could be a guy you put on the outside, but you also have guys like Kingsley Suamataia that you took last year. Do you just want to solidify that inside? Huh. This is a tough pick. I'm gonna go Gray Zabel because I do think in the end, if you just ask me straight up, who do you think will go higher in the draft? Josh Connerly or Gray Zabel? I will probably say Gray Zabel, and with a race that is so close at that spot, I do think Gray Zabel would barely edge out Josh Connerly. Now the Philadelphia Eagles. It's almost not fair because Donovan Ezraku is one of the best edge rushers in the draft. He had 16 and a half sacks last year at Boston College. He's a little bit smaller, doesn't necessarily fit the mold that you think of when you think of the Philadelphia Eagles. What the heck? Uh, sorry. I don't know what happened with my camera there. I hope it's back on. Let me just double check real quick. Yeah, we're on. We're still going. We're good. I don't know what happened there, but we're back. And Philadelphia Eagles, like I said, Donovan Ezraku does not necessarily fit the prototypical Philadelphia edge rusher, but he is big for his size. He's 6'2", 250, and with his production that he showed at the college level, I think he could fit in anywhere, especially with the team that develops defensive linemen as well as Philadelphia Eagles do. Okay, we're going to go a little bit faster through the second round, but we are going to focus in on some picks. I think these first two picks, the Browns and the Giants, will be quarterback. And you're looking at the guys here, Tyler Shuck and Jalen Milrow are the guys that have been really rumored to go pretty high in the draft recently. And I think the Browns, I think they're a team that think they can compete. And a lot of people love Tyler Chuck. I don't. I'll tell you why. Because he's going to be 26 by the time the NFL season starts. And usually, if you're taking a guy who is that experienced, you usually want, or that old, you want a guy who's super experienced, played 60 games in college. No, Tyler Shuck didn't do that. Tyler Shuck played 7 games at Oregon, like 12 at Texas Tech, and like 12 at Louisville. That is a total of like 32 games, half of what Bo Nix did, and he's 26. I don't see a huge like potential for him, and he could be a good backup quarterback. I would take him in the fourth. I wouldn't take him this high, but it is looking more and more likely that the Browns, who took Travis Hunter earlier, would take a quarterback to go along with him. And Tyler Shuck is the guy who's been rising up the draft boards. New York Giants. This is a team that already has Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, so you have security for this year. That leads to the potential for a little bit of a gamble. And Jalen Milroe is a gamble. He's a guy who has the athletic prowess to be an elite quarterback in this league. And he also has the deep ball ability, like I said earlier. And at this spot, when you already have a guy like Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston starting, you can you can have a risk like a Jalen Milroe. You can afford to take that risk. So I do think Jalen Milroe, 34 to the Giants, does make sense. The Tennessee Titans would be really happy here. There are a lot of guys here that they could go with. They could solidify their offensive line a little bit more with Josh Connerly if they wanted to go that route. They could take Luther Burden or Emeka Ibuka to pair with Cam Ward. They could take James Pierce Jr., who was one of the top prospects, possibly a number one overall pick before the college football season started. But I do think in the end, I think you got to bring in a receiver to pair with your guy in Cam Ward because they do not have anybody on that team. It is Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley? No, Calvin Ridley. And then the next guy is Traylon Burks or like Nick Westbrook Akine, I think. It's not a great receiver group. And you're looking at these two guys, and Emeka Ibuka was the definition of consistency at Ohio State. And I do think he can translate in the next level, especially in that slot. He can make a bunch of big plays happen. And I think this would be an excellent pick for them. The Jacksonville Jaguars, who selected James Pierce Jr. earlier in the or not James Pierce Jr. What am I saying? They selected Ashton Jinty earlier in the draft. They could definitely go James Pierce Jr. here. They also have a need at the defensive interior and at the wait, where's there it is. And at this spot you have a guy like I don't know if you want to go Darius Alexander here. That's a little bit high. I don't think that would be the area they go with here. They do really need secondary. Kevin Winston has been rising up. Max Harrison here, I think, is going to be the pick, though. This is a guy who, like I said earlier, he's really fast. He's sticky. He sticks to the guys. And this is a team that really needs some secondary help. And I think that a guy like a Maxwell Harrison really helps you do that. All right, next up, the Las Vegas Raiders. They did not get Ashton Jinty earlier. They took Shedur Sanders, but there's still a top tier running back on the board in Trevion Henderson. This is a guy where I view him more as a complementary back, but if they can get a decent power back in free agency, if the Raiders could sign Nick Chubb and pair him with Trevion Henderson, I think that would be really good for next year. And then Trevion Henderson can be similar to a guy like a Jahmyr Gibbs. Maybe not reach the same level, but he's definitely a guy who can be a really great piece and elusive guy. And I think you get Shedeur Sanders that running game, which is not something he ever had in college. And I think he would be very, very grateful for that. The Patriots, they are happy here. I think at this spot, it is either Luther Burden or James Pierce Jr. after you took Will Campbell earlier in the draft. And huh. You have Stephon Diggs. That's really your only great receiver. So I'm tempted to take Luther Burden, but is the skill of James Pierce Jr. too much? It's whew, this is a really, really interesting spot. I think I'm gonna go with Luther Burden here. James Pierce has a little bit of character concerns. He might not fit in with what Mike Vrabel wants to build on that team with their culture. And I think Luther Burden, I think he's a good culture guy. He is a mauler. He's similar to Puka Nakua, except he runs really fast. He's 4.41. He's a bruiser. He's a great slot guy. He's actually decently similar to Stephon Diggs as well. And I think you can slot him right in on that team, and that can be an immediate impact guy. Whew. The Chicago Bears. There are two guys I'm really thinking about here, but James Pierce Jr. at the spot, too much to pass up on. This is a team that took Tyler Warren earlier. They still need a little bit of help on the defensive line, and James Pierce Jr. is one of those guys who, at the beginning of the process, like I already said, was a potential number one pick. This is a guy who has really been an elite guy in college. He would be a designated pass rusher in the NFL, I believe, but he'd be an elite designated pass rusher. And sometimes you have to have those guys. He can really, really get to the quarterback, and that's something that Chicago needs. Next up, the New Orleans Saints, who took Jackson Dart earlier, are now going to look at Nick Scorton potentially. You can maybe take Alec Iomanor or Iomanor, I think, to pair with your guy in Jackson Dart. You could take a Jaden Higgins here too. Landon Jackson's available. I think in the end, this is a team that does need defensive line help. And Nick Scorton here, that works. Kellen Moore was on the Philadelphia Eagles team that won the Super Bowl because of their defensive line. And I think if you add on to that New Orleans defensive line, a guy like Nick Scorton, who was viewed as a first round pick during the college football season, he's kind of dropped off a little bit since then, but he would be a great pick here. Chicago Bears, just finessing the draft. You get Tyler Warren, James Pierce Jr., and now you get Josh Connerly out of Oregon. This is a guy who's in that top tier of tackles, and then it drops. It takes a gap. There's a gap between the next guys. And if you're getting a guy like that in the second round, you have to capitalize. This is a guy who could have gone in the first round, but slid all the way down to 41 for your taking. And they finessed here with Tyler Warren, James Pierce, and Josh Connerly. That would be a haul. A plus draft for them. Next up, the New York Jets. They took Mason Graham earlier. There's potential for offensive lineman here. I don't think they would, though, because there's not a great right tackle that could be selected unless you think Ursi out of Minnesota can be that. But you do need some. You don't need defensive interior help. You took Mason Graham earlier. What is this pick gonna be? I am stumped here. To be honest, I don't know who it would be. Let's take a look through the prospects that are available. So, interesting. So, tight end is a need here. And I think that's where I'm going to go. I've heard a lot of buzz about Mason Taylor going super high, possibly even first round to the Eagles, is something that I've heard with him shopping around Dallas Goddard. And I think a guy like a Mason Taylor can really help build up that offense that has guys like Justin Fields. He's a good blocker. He can be that safety valve tight end that they need. And then you get a guy in Mason Graham in the first round that lets you take a guy like a Mason Taylor in the second. So I do think this would be a good pick for them at this spot. Next up, the San Francisco 49ers. They took Armand Membu earlier. I think this is probably a cornerback here or defensive line. Let's take a peek at the defensive line real quick, see who's available. Landon Jackson could definitely be a pick here. I think he's the last like truly really good edge rusher that I really like. That might be where I go. He's 6'7" and 280. He's a big boy and he's good. But you also have guys like Trey Amos, Benjamin Morrison, Simone Revel, Darian Porter, and Azare Thomas here. And I do think Darian Porter is going to go really high. Darian Porter had the best athletic score of any cornerback ever at the draft. He is lanky. He is fast. He ran like a 4.39 maybe at 6'4", 200. He has insane measurables. He's born to play cornerback. He was a little inconsistent at Iowa State, but he was a former wide receiver. He just started learning cornerback 2 or 3 years ago, and he's already this good. And he's from Iowa State, which is the college of your franchise quarterback that you think is your franchise quarterback in Brock Purdy. Dallas Cowboys. Running back is definitely in the play here, but I think you took Matthew Golden earlier. I think this would be defensive line. I think they're looking at that position, but also, hold up, offensive line could be in play here. I'm not sure if a guy like a Donovan Jackson would go this high, but you know what? Zach Martin just retired, and you have a gap in that guard position. And if you really like Donovan Jackson at this spot, that's a potential guy. So Donovan Jackson will be the selection. Like I said, Zach Martin retired. You have a need at that area now. And Donovan Jackson was really good at Ohio State. He moved into the left tackle spot after Josh Simmons got injured, and he played well there, so he can be a swing tackle if he needs to. The Indianapolis Colts, I believe they took Colston Loveland earlier. And now, who do they go with? This is a team that loves their athletic guys. They do need some secondary help. So I'm looking at Kevin Winston. Here's a guy who was viewed really highly before the season started for college football, but then he got injured. He fell off a little bit, but he's been running good and he's been testing well before the draft. But I think what I've come down to is either Benjamin Morrison or Savone Revel. And in the end, I think I'm going to go Savone Revel. This was a guy who was drawing comps to Kenyon Mitchell at East Carolina before the season. He got injured during the season. He was very athletic. I think he will translate to the next level. He did tear his ACL. There's some concern there, but I've heard that recovery has been going well, and he should return back to full form. The Atlanta Falcons took Shamar Stewart earlier. I think this will be defense again, and we're going to see a little bit of a run on defensive backs go because I think at this spot, Trey Amos makes a lot of sense. This is a guy who I believe is 6'3", like 200. Nope. No, that was wrong. 6'1", 190. But he is a playmaker on the ball. He can be a great fit with a guy like an AJ Terrell. And I think this adds another level to your defense that really was a little bit shaky last year. All right, next up, the Arizona Cardinals. This is probably defensive line here. And I could also see this being corner, though. I'm really, really tempted to give them Landon Jackson. And but I think they need more defensive interior. And you have a guy in Darius Alexander who's here who's really shot up the draft boards out of Toledo. He's a guy who dominated at the Senior Bowl and he dominated at lower competition in Toledo. He's 6'4", 310. He drew some similar comps to Aaron Donald with his playstyle. Not that he's that dominant, but he rips just like Aaron Donald and he can get through that offensive line. All right, the Miami Dolphins. This is a team that really needs offensive line help, and I think Big Jonah Savai, I'm not going to say it, Big Jonah out of Arizona. He is a guy who he played tackle in college, but he can be a shifty guard in the NFL, and I do think this would be a position of need for the Dolphins, and this is a pick where they would, I think they would go with offensive line here in the second round. Next up, the Cincinnati Bengals. This is a team that needs defense. Benjamin Morrison's here, which is interesting. Kevin Winston, Xavier Watts are here. Those could all be guys they go with. But you took Walter Nolan earlier, and Landon Jackson's also really good. I think I'm going to go with Landon Jackson here out of Arkansas. He's a beast, and that you've really patched up that defensive line in the draft if you go first two picks defensive linemen. And then if you're able to keep Trey Hendrickson, you go from a team where it's basically just Trey Hendrickson on the defense to having a defensive line with guys like Trey Hendrickson, Walter Nolan, and Landon Jackson. I almost said Geno Atkins, but it is not Geno Atkins. It is Walter Nolan. All right. This would be a spot for the Seahawks where they would be sad because I think they want either Jonah or Donovan Jackson here. They need guard desperately. They do not have great offensive line at all. But at this spot, I could see a guy like a Marcus Bow going here. He is 6'5", 300. He can play at the tackle or the guard position. Ariante Ursi is a monster of a man, almost 6'7", 330. He's 23. He's a little bit older, but I think this is going to be a offensive lineman in the end. I could also see this being Ozzy Trapillo. Um, let's go Marcus Bow out of Purdue. I think this is a guy that's good. I think he could fill in some offensive line need for them at this spot, and I think he would really, really help the Seattle Seahawks team. Next up, the Denver Broncos, who selected Amari and Hampton earlier. I think this is receiver or tight end at this spot. So you're looking at either Elijah Arroyo, Alec Ayomanor, Jane Higgins, Kyle Williams, or Jalen Noel. I think we're going to see a little bit of a run on these skill guys at this spot. And I think that Alec Ayomanor or Alec Iomanor, as I've heard more often, could work here. But I do think Jaden Higgins is a guy that a lot of teams like. He's fast. He is, I believe, 6'4", right? Yeah, 6'4", 215. Prototypical size. He can be an X receiver. And I think he can comp similar to Cortland Sutton. And I think they would really complement each other well. All right, Seattle Seahawks. I think you took Tet earlier. You took Marcus Bow just a couple seconds ago, and now you need defensive line. And there are a lot of options here. Princely Umanmielen, JT Tuamolio, Jack Sawyer, Braden Swinson, Omar Norman Lott. But I think in the end, I'm going to go with TJ Sanders. This is a guy who played really, really well at South Carolina. I had him in the first round after the season. I had him there for a while, and he's just kind of been dropping a little bit. But I could see him go even higher than this, and I do think he's a great prospect. He has good size. Let's look at that real quick. 6'4", 290. And I think he fits in with what the Seahawks want to do. Okay, next up, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who took Jahdae Barron earlier. This is a team that needs a little bit more defensive line help on the edge, particularly. And there's a guy who is a pseudo linebacker slash lineman who can have, like this says, positional versatility. And I think that at this spot they need a linebacker. I had them taking Jod Campbell for a long time, and I think Olufemi Oladejo out of UCLA would be a great pick for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at this spot. This Green Bay Packers team is a team that needs a number one receiver, a true X guy. They have a ton of number two receivers, but no one to really stand out. And Alec Iomanor is a guy who can do that. So he's fast, he's big, he's 6'2", 210. He isn't enormous, but with his size, he uses it really well. He can get up, make those contested catches, and he can be a real end zone threat. Now, the LA Chargers, I think this is another skill guy, and I think I'm gonna go Jack Besh. He kind of fits the Harbaugh identity. He is a bruising wide receiver. Comps from Puka Nakua or to Puka Nakua coming out of the Senior Bowl where he dominated. He was a guy who really showed off there, and I think he played him his way into the second round range. And I do think he could go here at this spot. Next up, the Buffalo Bills. They took Carson Schwetzinger earlier, and I still think defensive interior is a need. So is edge for this team. And let's look at these guys. You got Braden Swinson, Princely Umanmielen, Jared Ivey, JTT, Jack Sawyer, still available. And then on the defensive interior, you have guys like Omar Norman Lott, Tyleek Williams. And in the end, I think I'm going to pair Greg Rousseau with a guy like a Braden Swinson. This was a guy who was really, really consistent at LSU. He was one of their most consistent defensive linemen, and he helped them. He's a guy who has, let me check his measurables real quick. He is 6'4", 250. He is pretty athletic, and I think he can come in to Buffalo and be a decent starter right away. Carolina Panthers. I think this is a spot where they probably would go defense, and you have guys like Azare Thomas, who's fallen all the way down here, which would be very interesting to pair with a guy like a oh, what's his name, J.C. Horn. But I think Xavier Watts fits what they need a little bit better, and he is a very versatile player, and I think he could come in and have a great impact on this Carolina team. Next up, the Houston Texans. Ooh, where do I want to go here? So they took Tyler Booker earlier. This could very well be defense. D'Amico Ryans is a defensive guy, but there's been a guy who's been rising up the draft boards, and Jalen Noel, who is a great receiver. He is a little similar to Tank Dell. He's even a little bit more explosive. He's not a big guy. He would go in the slot. He's 5'11", 200, and he can be a gadget guy. He can return kicks, he can return punts, he can be that speedster on that team, and I think you pair him with Tank Dell, that could be a dangerous pairing. Next up, the Baltimore Ravens. They took Nick Eamon earlier. I still think they need a little bit of defensive line help, and Princely Omonmielen here would be a good pick. He was a cornerstone of this Ole Miss defensive line, which was dominant last year. He's 6'4", 255, and he can be a great finesse pass rusher in the league. Next up, the Detroit Lions here. They took, I believe, Jahad Campbell earlier, yes. And now you're looking at either a guard because they have some questions there, as well as Frank Ragnow possibly retiring. So Tate Ratledge could be a guy there. Seth McLaughlin maybe. Jared Wilson possibly. Let's look at who else is here though. Um, They took Jahad Campbell earlier. They do still need an edge to pair with Aiden Hutchinson, a true edge. And I think Jack Sawyer really fits this Detroit Lion team. He feels like a Lion. The only thing that doesn't feel like him and the Lions, he's from Ohio State and Aiden Hutchinson's from Michigan. That's the only thing. He has the attitude of a Lion, and I think that that is someone that a guy like Dan Campbell, that's the name. Yeah, how did I forget Dan Campbell's name? That a guy like Dan Campbell would love in Detroit. Now, Washington, they selected Michael Williams earlier in the draft. And I think this is a spot where they need another running back. They need a dynamic guy. And I think pairing. Which one of these guys do I want to go with? I think I'm going to go with Quinshon Judkins. Pairing a guy like Quinshon Judkins with Brian Robinson and maybe mixing in Austin Eckler a little bit too could really help this team and adds another level to their offense. And I think you might start to see the running back, the just a run of running backs start here and go into the third round. Now we got the Buffalo Bills. They have taken Carson Schweschinger and Braden Swinson. I could see this being a receiver, but they do have a lot of guys there. Kyle Williams is a guy that I really like, and I could see him. I honestly think he'll go higher than this. You could see guys like maybe Savion Williams go here, but Schweschinger, I think Tyler Williams or Omar Norman a lot makes sense here, or Shamar Turner. I'm going to go Shamar Turner here. This was a guy who played with the likes of Shamar Stewart and Nick Scorton at Texas A&M, but he was injured all of last year. He still put up good production, and I think that Buffalo defense would really, really bolster themselves through this draft. All right, now the Kansas City Chiefs. They are probably looking at running back, and you have a guy in Caleb Johnson who played really well at Iowa. 6', 225. He can catch the ball. He's really good at a lot of stuff. He can get through the holes. He's got really great awareness with those getting through the gaps. I think Caleb Johnson would be a good pick for the Kansas City Chiefs here to mix in with Isaiah Pacheco. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles. I really want to get Kyle Williams into the second round. I'm going to be honest. But I could also see this being Ben Morrison. They don't really have many corners other than Coop DeJean and Kenyon Mitchell. And when you have a guy like Azari Thomas and Benjamin Morrison slide all the way down here, I think you have to go Benjamin Morrison here because he is, before the injury, he was really athletic. He was a big piece of that Notre Dame squad. And if he falls all the way down here, I think they would have to lock that in. All right. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And this was a fun video. I enjoyed doing it. And here's the overall view of the draft if you want it one more time. And yeah, thanks for watching. And we'll see you next time. Peace out.